You've seen those commercials. I won $500,000 on a $5 bet in daily fantasy football. You've also seen the horror stories. I lost my entire life savings playing daily fantasy football. Well, in this episode, we're going to teach you the 5 things you absolutely need to know before you spend a dime on daily fantasy football. Hello, everyone. I'm Gary Kurtzman.
And I'm Eric Lee, and we are the Fantasy Football Consultants. And Gary, I'm excited about this particular show because we take a close look at DFS and reveal the true facts.
And you know, DFS is becoming more popular, it seems like, every week and every month, Eric. So I think this is a very timely show for a very growing audience.
Yeah, and we're going to do a video about the specific tips that improves your odds, but that's not what we're doing today. Today we're going to look at what you need to know before you play.
That's right. And maybe just to kick it off and start talking about bankroll, because I think so many people, you know, either don't focus on how much they bid in a week, or maybe they lose track of it. And, you know, Eric, maybe some advice is in order about bankroll.
Yeah, let's be clear. DFS is gambling, and you got to gamble responsibly. So you cannot go in and go, let me put $50 this week, $75 next week, $100 next week. You have to commit to a maximum amount that you're going to invest for the entire season. So it could be, for example, that it's going to be $200, and that's the amount for the entire season that you're going to bet. If you lose it, you're done.
And that, of course, counts for both of the 2 types of games that there are, right? There are cash games, there are the guaranteed prize pool games. You know, in fact, maybe spend a moment talking about those.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. You should know what you are playing because it changes your philosophy and your strategy in building that lineup. You have your cash games, 2 really types of cash games. You can have a head-to-head, so you're competing directly against another DFS player, or you can have kind of a pool of players, either through a double-up or a 50-50 game with which approximately 50% of the people who are at the top get paid.
And those are the cash games. They're another type of game called guaranteed prize pool. Isn't that correct?
Exactly. So if the cash games are your singles in the baseball analogy, you're going for a home run if you're looking for the guaranteed prize pool. So that could be hundreds, thousands, or hundreds of thousands of people who are competing in this particular tournament, and only a few of the top ones are actually going to get paid out.
So if I play one of those, 50-50 or the head-to-head games, if I bet $100 and I win, I'll get maybe not quite $100 back because, of course, the house takes its cut, but something close to it. But if I really want to win the big, big, big money, that's when you're talking about the guaranteed prize pool.
Yes, and knowing that your odds are very low, and we'll talk more about that later.
Well, speaking of low odds, that's obviously got to be due to the competition that you're playing against, right? So, I think a lot of people who look at fantasy football, they often wonder, the commercials have everyday guys like you and me, and they're playing, but you got to wonder, are there sharks lurking beneath those waters there?
There are sharks out there, and you need to be concerned about that. So and they're tough.
Oh boy, I love that theme.
Now, it's important to know you are not going against DraftKings or FanDuel, right, the major sites, right? They win no matter what because they're going to take their cut. What you're going up against is other players, and the players that play the most are someone we call sharks. And sharks have 3 advantages, Gary, over the casual players. One is they have time, they have a big bankroll, and they have technology.
And, some of those advantages, of course, can be very hard to overcome. Maybe, talk a little bit. We've mentioned daily fantasy sports, and that's DraftKings and FanDuel. Are there differences? Are there, points to be made there?
There
Differences maybe?
There are a lot of differences, but it's important to note before you get into specifically playing in FanDuel or DraftKings that you have to know that it is difficult to win these tournaments against these sharks, because when I say time, they dedicate so much time and they have a bankroll to put a lot of entries in. So they're not just entering one of these tournaments once, they're entering it 500 times. And guess what? They have the technology. So when they hear first thing on Sunday, 30 minutes before game time, that guess what? The weather changed, or guess what? This starter is out, so his replacement is in. They can, with just their technology, change all 500 of their lineups. So if you're not doing that, you are at a disadvantage. And here's a very interesting fact. ESPN, from Outside the Lines, did a study in 2016, and they say, and I quote, nearly all, end quote, of players who enter less than 100 lineups and play the larger tournament get a negative return on investment.
Wow.
And
so when you dedicate all that time and you put in all those entries, it's almost like kind of like the law of averages, right? If you put in 500 entries and they can all be updated in real time with a program that can update 500 entries in seconds, it's just kind of the law of averages that one of those is likely to be the winner in a guaranteed prize pool. That's a heck of a lot of money.
Yeah, and to emphasize again how the deck is stacked against the casual player, Eisler's research looked at 1,400 DFS players, and it turns out that 70% actually lose money. I want to emphasize, though, it doesn't mean that daily fantasy is bad. It doesn't mean that DraftKings and FanDuel are evil. It's just that you need to understand the playing ground and of what you're getting into. And I know a lot of people who say, hey, we just do it for entertainment, and that's fine. But if you're doing it to make money, you need to understand what you're up against.
And understand, it sounds like, the deck is definitely stacked against you if you're not going to be one of those types of people that do 500 entries and dedicate all this time to it. Sounds like there's a 70% chance you're going to lose money.
Those are the facts. But you asked a really good question earlier. You said, hey, what happens if you're playing FanDuel or if you're doing DraftKings? Is it the same? Does it matter?
Talk about the differences a little bit.
Yeah, there are some differences that you should know, and maybe it will affect which one you choose to play on. My personal preference is FanDuel. It fits more of what I like. I know that you've played DraftKings, and I know you kind of like that, but let's just look at the lineups. Let's start with the lineups. Both DraftKings and FanDuel start a quarterback, start 2 running backs, start 3 wide receivers, and start a defense, and they start a tight end. Here's the difference. That extra position, DraftKings will actually put in a flex position where you can play either a running back, wide receiver, or a tight end, where FanDuel throws in a kicker.
And, I guess, for people that don't like the volatility of a kicker, because let's face it, who can predict what a kicker is going to do in any given game, right? It's mostly luck, make or miss the field goals, and, how long the field goal kicks are. Then it sounds like, DraftKings is kind of a better or worse way to go on that.
Yeah, you like DraftKings, but I kind of like FanDuel. And one of the reasons, and we're not getting to too many tips in this video, but I think the mistake that people make when they play FanDuel is they just ignore the kicker, thinking, oh, it doesn't matter. You can't ignore the position. It's not that you will spend most of your money on your kicker. You won't do that, but since the kickers are less value anyway, but you want to make sure you have a kicker from a high-scoring team that you can have a confidence that has a very high floor.
And what about, talk about the scoring system a little bit, or, maybe some other key differences?
Yeah, there's 2 big differences between DraftKings and FanDuel. One is in PPR. It's a full PPR for DraftKings and just a half PPR for FanDuel. So a guy like Christian McCaffrey, he's a lot more valuable in DraftKings because the guy catches a lot of passes.
And those experts that you're talking about that spend all that time and money doing all the programming, they have those up to the minute rankings, the kind of rankings that are offered at fantasyfootballconsultants.net to be able to really take advantage and tailor that to their specific scoring system of DraftKings and FanDuel.
Yeah, and that's what you need to do. And another difference is milestone scoring. It's another reason why I do not like DraftKings. If your quarterback throws for 300 yards, if your running back or receivers rush or receive for 100 yards, you get a 3-point bonus. FanDuel, no thanks. It just doesn't include that at all.
Yeah, so the guy who rushes for 99 yards and another guy rushes for 100 yards on the NFL field, they're worth about exactly the same, and it sounds like your FanDuel, they're worth about exactly the same too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you should be aware of that if you're playing for DraftKings. Maybe a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, who gets a lot of rushing yards and usually breaks that 100-yard plateau, might be slightly more valuable.
And Eric, it's really important to mention in a video like this, we're not trying to say that DraftKings or FanDuel is necessarily good or bad. They are perfectly viable forms of entertainment. These are just explaining some of the differences between the two and some of the caveats if you want to play daily fantasy football in general.
Yeah, and one reason I actually like DraftKings, because a lot of people don't know about the late swap strategy, and it's not applicable on FanDuel, because this is what FanDuel does. It has a slate of games on Sunday and Monday, and as soon as that Sunday morning game starts, your entire lineup is frozen. You can't change it. But on DraftKings, as long as that individual game has not started, you still can adjust it. So you can adjust for the afternoon games, you can adjust for the Sunday night game, and even the Monday name right up to the Monday night. And here's the strategy of the late swap. What you do is, in your flex position, always on DraftKings, play the player who is playing on Monday if you have a starter on Monday. Almost as good as Sunday night. So that means that if you go in, let's suppose you're in a head-to-head, we'll keep it simple, and on Monday night you are behind, but you know that your opponent is likely to pick this particular player because you can see their roster and what's left, then you don't want to pick that player because you're just going to do as well as he did.
Right.
You need to think outside the box. And by putting that person in the flex position, that opens the door for you to pick a wide receiver, a tight end, or a running back to swap out.
So, not trying to be a play on words, but obviously flexibility with this flex position is key.
It is.
So these are effectively what are amounted to the top 5 things that we think that you need to know about daily fantasy sports. But maybe we didn't cover everything. There are certainly maybe tips that you, the home viewer, think that other viewers would benefit from. Please, if you want to share a tip, if you want to share something that people need to know before playing fantasy football, go to our comment section on YouTube and share it. We welcome that, and other home viewers would too.
Yeah, we really do. We want to hear your outside of the box thinking. We'd love to hear just about your experience in playing DFS. Did you have a positive one? Did you have a negative one? Understand the big takeaway is you have to be engaged from the time of when you make your selection all the way up to when you make those final picks when the games close, to make sure you have all the latest information. If you enjoyed this video, you feel like you got something out of it, please go ahead and give it a like. It only takes a couple seconds. Move that cursor up to the like button.
And also, please do, if you like videos like these, subscribe to fantasyfootballconsultants.net, where you will get the latest in updated player analysis, sit-em, start-em recommendations, and forecasts for the rest of the season.
So go ahead and hit that red button right under this video, and you'll be subscribed. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.
That's all, folks.